I'm a little bit fired up tonight. I'm going to try not to be. I'm also really tired. It's an odd place to have like that polarity existing together. But one of the things that I've been sitting with the past week or so is this whole idea, and this is going to be an unpopular idea that I'm sharing, but this idea of the whole good versus evil, light versus dark concept. And there's a lot of people in the spiritual community who believe that in order for us to ascend from third dimensional reality into fifth dimensional reality, that we need to merge the polarities. And so we become one energy, and we don't necessarily see black and white or dark versus light and so forth. And I do agree that there is some movement in that direction as we ascend. However, we're existing in 3D right now, even if some of us are able to tap into the other dimensions. And I feel like it's a little bit to our detriment to assume or present the idea that there is no darkness, that there is no pain, that there is no suffering, and try to internalize that if we're seeing it. Because if we're presenting this idea of, if you're seeing darkness, then you haven't ascended enough, you haven't evolved enough, you're maybe not as spiritual worthy to be in the fifth dimension. And I don't think that that is helpful to anybody, but I also don't think that it's accurate. I think that there are some souls who are here who already exist in that dimension and maybe aren't in third. And so maybe in their reality, they don't actually see some of the pain and suffering and darkness. And I think that's okay. But I also feel like there are some of us who are here right now who are meant to bear witness to some of that darkness, to some of that pain and some of that suffering. And when I say bear witness to it, it's almost like, for example, someone who has been abused or had a significant trauma in their past. And if we were to say to that individual, well, that didn't exist, that trauma didn't exist, that was because your soul hadn't evolved enough and you were in this other dimension and you now need to just, forgive and merge all of that together, and then you will ascend into a higher place where there is no pain and suffering. In my experience, working with a lot of individuals who have trauma, and just in my own experience of healing, that doesn't help me. It actually, in many ways, slows down the healing process for me. And what I find actually accelerates it is when somebody sits with you and says, I believe you. I know that you went through something that was very real to you, and it was really difficult for you, and I believe you. And having that trust in someone, and having that trust in whatever your experience was, even if the other person doesn't necessarily understand it because they didn't go through it. But knowing that there is that trust and that witness on some level to it allows individuals to progress through their healing faster, in my opinion. Obviously, I don't have scientific studies to back that up. And so as we move through this period right now where there's all kinds of information, spiritual, political, scientific, etc., of what we should be doing right now, I'm really concerned about this movement suggesting that what's happening in terms of darkness and pain and suffering isn't actually happening. I think that we really do, some of us, need to feel it in order to release it from human consciousness, and need to be able to see it and say, you know what? You may not be a bad person inside, but those actions were harmful to humans or harmful to the planet on whatever level that was. And that's not something we want to bring forward into whatever this new world is that we create. And on that note, in some of my meditations as well, I've been reflecting on how as a spiritual community, we internalize a lot of our challenges and faults and so forth. So for example, something bad happens in my life, I have some kind of frustrating thing that happens in my life, and the spiritual thing to do is to look at where have I maybe projected that, where have I manifested that, And I do agree to that to a certain extent of, going through a period of reflection to see, is there anything that I want to evolve in myself? Is there an energy that I need to heal or integrate? But I also wonder, as we play out this whole concept of dark and light right now on the planet, there's part of me that really seriously questions, because I like my questions, I seriously question about how genius and devious would it be if the dark were able to convince the light workers that there is no darkness, and any darkness that exists is actually due to the light workers. You just sit with that for a second. This came to me in a meditation one day, and actually one of my teachers came in the meditation, and he's like, no, this isn't you. This is the darkness creating that. And everyone around us is convincing us that there is no darkness. But what if our power actually came from standing up and saying, no, that's actually not part of who I am. And I'm not going to blame myself for that anymore. And I'm actually just going to move beyond it and recognize that perhaps some of those things don't necessarily need integration. They just need release. So anyway, I don't know the answer to that. And I'm not claiming that to be the truth or the one truth or the whole truth or anything along that lines. But it's certainly a question that I've been sitting with the last week or two. I mean, it's been there for a long time, but it's really come up in the last week or two. Because I have a lot of people who are not happy with some of my viewpoints right now there's work to do. We're not just sitting around. And I think, especially in Canada, maybe it's time for us to ruffle some feathers. We're a pretty politically kind society, and sometimes I think maybe our kindness allows us to sweep things under the rug. And perhaps it's not time for us to do that right now, but to actually stand up and express ourselves a little bit more, even if they are unpopular. So that's my opinion. What I wanted to do tonight is going to be a free flow as well, but I wanted to do a scan of the body energetically, and we're going to bring a lot of light in to our field, and then I want to remove any energies that are not inherent or organic to your field. In the last probably 4 or 5 weeks, I've been removing stuff like crazy, stuff that I didn't even see before. I know it was there for a long time, but I just couldn't see it because of the different overlays of energy. But as things start to lift, we're able to see a little bit more. And some of those energies could be other energies that have been in our life. It could be cords that we have to people that have had a significant impact in our life. It could be artificial intelligence that we have just picked up from the technology that we're exposed to in the world that we live in. And both of you know that I've kind of moved away from the concept of battling energy or pushing energy away, and moving more towards an image of dissolving. So when we come to something that maybe doesn't feel like it's ours, or it feels like it's external, my rule of thumb is to greet the energy first, to acknowledge that it's there, to see if it has a message for me, to engage in a conversation so that I can learn. But it also, I find, builds my capacity to be able to discern the energies that are coming in. Because the more that I talk to them, the more information I get, but also the more time I have to feel out their energy and ask those questions of, does this feel good? Does this feel truthful? And if I'm ever unsure, I always call in God, Creator, Universal Oneness, whatever you want to call them. I'll bring their light in, and I will ask God, is this energy in my higher good? And if it's not, remove it. And then I'll just pause and see what happens. And if the energy stays, then I usually will have a little more trust for it. And if it doesn't, then I've got my answer.